Hey, what's up, guys? Hello for Football Talk here. The 2020 NFL season has come to a close with Super Bowl 55. The hype around this game was incredible. So many stars on the field. Tampa Bay being the first team to ever host a Super Bowl at their home stadium. Two longtime head coaches, with one of them having won his first ring last year, and the other one getting his first chance at one this game. And, of course, the quarterback battle between the GOAT Tom Brady and the kid Patrick Mahomes. Little did we know that this game would turn into a blowout. I will kind of run through the game first and then tell you what the Bucks did to win by 22 points, breaking down schematic details, point out individual players, and talk about the effects of this result beyond the game. In a matchup between two great quarterbacks and the offenses as a whole, we only saw two combined first downs over the course of the first three possessions, as Patrick Mahomes couldn't quite connect with Mecole Hardman deep twice, and Frank Clark getting the only sack of the night for Kansas City, before the Chiefs were actually first to get on the board with a long field goal, as Mahomes escaped a couple of times to his left. However, after this is when the Bucks attack really started to kick in, and they were inches away from scoring touchdowns on 4 consecutive drives, with a couple of chunk plays to Antonio Brown coming back on a play action shot, and a tight end screen to Cameron Brate, setting up an easy touchdown for Gronk, where he released into the flats off an almost RPO looking play, which is something that you barely ever see them do. Mike Evans gaining 31 yards on a deep crosser, which was actually his only catch of the night, setting up another goal-to-goal situation, where he had eligible tackle Joe Haig not quite being able to make a clean catch at the back line of the end zone, and then Ronald Jones getting stuffed twice at the goal line. On the next one, Kansas City helped him out with a couple of huge penalties to extend the drive, taking off a Tyrann Mathieu interception with a ticky-tack defensive hold, and an offside on a field goal, leading to Gronk catching his second touchdown as he uncovered late. And then finally, with under a minute left, the Bucks handed the ball off on first down, but then Andy Reid and the Chiefs really hurt themselves by calling a couple of timeouts, only for the Bucks to convert and get back into a scoring mindset, as Mike Evans drew a couple of big flags that you could argue came on uncatchable passes, before Brady hit AB on a little pivot route back to the inside for a 1-yard touchdown with just a few seconds left, while the Chiefs gained just 15 combined yards over the next two possessions, before ultimately adding on another field goal after Mahomes connected a few times underneath with Travis Kelce. You look back at those possessions for the Chiefs, Tyreek Hill had a pass in the end zone hit his face mask, Kelce could not hold on to a third down pass that Pat threw whilst falling down, that hit the tight end right in the hands, forcing a punt deep from their own territory, which they were lucky to get the first one off clean, but when they had to redo it, because of a penalty, the punter shanked it, and then when they finally made it into the red zone, Mahomes had to retreat immediately on third down and throw it away. So many missed opportunities were a big story in the first half for the Chiefs, plus the 9 penalties for 95 yards, which had the Bucks up 21-6 at the break. Clyde Edwards-Helaire ripped off a couple of big runs to start the second half, setting up Harrison Butker's third field goal of the game, and the Chiefs' final points of the night, as Tampa would answer with another trip to the end zone, where Brady hit Gronk down the seams off play action, and then Leonard Fournette's physical running did the rest of the work, which is when I really started to doubt that the Chiefs could somehow fight their way back. The ensuing drive, Mahomes got sacked by Shaquille Barrett, and then on third and long, a deep pass ricocheted into the hands of safety Antoine Winfield for an interception, before Kansas City was actually lucky that a snap on third down went over Brady's head, which forced a long field goal that Ryan Succop just was able to squeeze in, and there could have been a final glimmer of hope if Brady doesn't jump on that ball and they somehow recover it around midfield, down by 19, but that didn't happen, and we didn't see any more points over the final 18 minutes, because while Mahomes did take the Chiefs inside the opposing 30 3 more times, on the first one, he had to run around like a maniac on 3 straight plays, with the first pass going off the hands of DeMarcus Robinson on what should have been a touchdown, and the other two nearly connecting as well, even though he was getting twisted down and didn't have his feet on the ground. We all saw the one where it's like parallel to the ground, and then the other two possessions ended with prayers pretty much, which the first one was knocked out by Antoine Winfield, after which he showed Tyreek the deuces to get revenge for what happened in the first matchup, and the second one fittingly being picked up with Darren White, who had a monster game. Let's break down what happened with the Chiefs offense versus the Bucks defense. If you had told me that Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill were the two leading receivers of the entire game, with 17 catches for over 200 yards combined, no way would I have ever said that the Chiefs would have scored single-digit points for the first time with Mahomes on the center. Their offensive game plan to me was highly questionable, as they took way too many true dropbacks when Mahomes had to scan the field, rather than the RPO and West Coast approach that they just used against the Bills in the AFC title game, which allowed the Bucks to exploit the biggest mismatch in their favor which was that ferocious front four against the makeshift offensive line, as they pressured the Chiefs quarterback on 28 of 52 dropbacks and made him run for his life, especially in the second half. And even though you could tell that Mahomes was bothered by that toe still, he finished the night with 497 yards of scrambles. That's 1.5 times as many yards as the team had as a whole. What impressed me the most about Tampa Bay as a team, and I'll get to how that manifested itself in the offense in a minute, was the willingness of the coaching staff to adapt to play calling and strategy. Todd Bowles was one of the most aggressive defensive coordinators during the regular season in terms of sending extra blitzes and putting pressure on the young secondary. We saw that worked out in the first meeting between these two teams back in Week 12, when Tyreek Hill had over 200 receiving yards in the first quarter alone, before switching to more bracket and zone coverages, which they found much more success with. In this game, they rushed 4 or 5 on almost every snap to go with a couple of well-designed blitzes early on, and they still didn't risk getting beat deep. Overall, they blitzed on less than 10% of the snaps, versus the usual average of 39% in the regular season, and they tested that reshuffled offensive line and the communication with a lot of twists, putting Vita Vea at end and replacing him with JPP on the inside. On the back end, they played so much too, and some free dip coverages, where those guys consistently stayed over the top of whoever streaked downfield. Plus they played some two-man, where the safeties diagnosed where the vertical routes would be and stayed over the top with those. And so Mahomes ended the night 0 for 6 with an interception on passes that traveled 20 plus yards downfield. Like I showed in one of my weekly breakdowns, following the divisional round against the Saints, those two Bucs linebackers and Darren White and Lavonte David were flying all around the field, constantly taking away angles towards the sideline when Kansas City tried to use their speed. They felt comfortable at playing those deep coverages because they knew that they had those two guys underneath that could control those areas of the field and not allow short passes to get going. But most of all, it was Shaquille Barrett, Jason Pierre-Paul, and Ndamukong Suh and all the other guys that they rotated through, whooping ass all night long. Mike Ramos, who switched to left tackle for the injured Eric Fisher in this game, had his lunch money taken over and over again, and so many times you saw guys get beat instantly and putting pressure on Mahomes to move around. On the other side of the ball, with the Bucs offense versus the Chiefs defense, the Bucs receivers combined for just 62 yards on the night, but Gronk was a big factor in this game, and play of Lenny racked up 135 scrimmage yards on 20 touches, while converting all but one of their 4 red zone trips into touchdowns outside of their goal line stop that could have really gone either way, while Kansas City went 0 for 3 in the red zone. I was positively surprised by Tampa Bay when they threw the ball in the first play of the game, since their early on tendencies of focusing on the run had been something that I went in depth on when analyzing this matchup, looking at how inefficient they were in that area, only for them to hand it off the next 3 first downs anyway. But it really didn't matter on plenty of occasions, because they ripped off 5+ yards consistently, and then they ran a lot of play action. But when they did, Brady got the ball out quickly. I think it was right around 2 seconds per drop back. They used a lot of condensed formations and quick snaps to take away Kansas City's ability to disguise and be creative with their back 7. The big story to me coming into this matchup was how the Bucs would handle Steve Spagnuolo's different blitz packages, which were a huge issue for them back in Week 12. I just talked about how the condensed formation and quick snaps limited what they could do with the blitzes, but when the Chiefs did try to come after Brady, with blitzes on 3rd down especially, he had answers, like getting the ball to Fournette underneath, because when the Chiefs put everybody at the line for those blitzes, they usually have a couple of guys bailing out, and when the ball came out underneath, those guys were still retreating and not being able to redirect. The guys on the outside for Kansas City might not have gotten burned, but their very style of coverage, which really wasn't penalized in either conference championship game, drew several flags, and Brady attacked the middle of the field with Gronk, to the point where the Chiefs started having somebody pump him at the line, and then have a safety or linebacker pick him up behind that. But that second level for Kansas City could not hang with the Bucs. If they needed to, they could have probably scored another couple of touchdowns, because the Chiefs simply couldn't stop the run and take away the areas of the field that Tampa Bay wanted to attack on 3rd downs. Overall, there was a lot of talk about the discrepancy in penalties, and Kansas City fans were upset for what happened in the first half, but in the end, it didn't change the outcome in my opinion, and the better team clearly won. But the one thing I want to say here is that the refs almost overcorrected their unwillingness to toss that yellow piece of cloth, which was talked about after the NFC Championship game in particular, by letting it fly as soon as there was any contact by the DBs. Brady gets the 7th ring, and as I thought about it, I have a hard time seeing anybody catch him as the GOAT, whether it's Mahomes or anybody else. And that comes from somebody who doubted Mahomes coming out of college, but then said after 2 games of the 2018 season, when he took over as the starter, that this guy would take the league by storm. I'm very happy for Bruce Arians to finally get that ring as a head coach, and I think that whole coaching staff deserves a lot of credit. Todd Bowles in particular put together an outstanding game plan for this matchup, and the defense put on an absolute show. They had like 3 or 4 members of that unit that could have easily taken home MVP honors. And finally, let's take a little look ahead to 2021. Now we enter the offseason, and there's a lot of time to figure out how rosters will change and what some teams may do in this arms race to put themselves over the top. And the biggest piece will be the Deshaun Watson situation before we get into free agency and the draft. For these 2 teams in particular, the Chiefs likely will have to part ways with Sammy Watkins, which won't really make any difference anyway. And the big one could be right tackle Mitchell Schwartz, who a lot of people who cover the Chiefs closely have the feeling that he won't return. Plus, left tackle Eric Fisher most likely won't be ready for the start of the 2021 season with a torn Achilles. And we just saw what happens if they miss both their bookends. However, they should get back reinforcements on the interior with LeRon Duvernay Tardif, and maybe if they re-sign Kelechi Osemele, who had a couple of dominant weeks to start the year, but then was lost for the rest of the season. They also have their only 2 16-game starters on that line become free agents in center Austin Reiter and guard Andrew Wally. Defensively, cornerbacks Trevarius Ward and Bashar Breeland have expiring contracts, but other than that, it's mostly role players. For the Bucks, the 2 big pieces here are Chris Godwin and Shaquille Barrett. There have already been reports that Jason Licht wants to bring back Godwin on a long-term deal or the franchise tag, but I think Barrett, unless he wants to really come back, has played his way out of Tampa Bay because he's never made any big money until receiving the tag this past offseason, and he should get paid around $22 to $25 million a year. They have some other big names becoming free agents potentially, but I think Lavonte David wants to be a Bucks lifer. Gronk has said many times that he only wants to catch passes from Brady. AB will want to be back after they give him another chance. And Ndamukong Suh is the one I'm not sure about. Maybe he'll be willing to re-up for another year to remain on the championship roster. And star receiver Mike Evans has already said that he'll be willing to take a pay cut in order to bring everybody back. So other than Barrett, I could see pretty much the entire group being back, plus a couple of other pieces potentially. Both of these franchises could benefit from the uncertainty of 2021, with the salary cap not rising as steadily as it would in a normal pandemic-free year. We'll have to see how this develops, but players will be advised to wait for another year potentially, to cash in on a long-term contract, and maybe sign with one of these contenders for a chance to win a ring and increase their value that way. So a very unique and interesting offseason is ahead of us, and I'll be here to break everything down that happens. But now let's wrap up this recap and really the 2020 NFL season. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, share it with a couple of friends who might be interested in these detailed breakdowns. I'll have a write-up on the biggest standouts from Senior Bowl week later on this week and really dive into the draft, which will feel a lot different as well in terms of no combine and limited personal workouts. Plus we will break down what happens in free agency and some big trades potentially. A lot of stuff coming up. So until then, see you later. Peace.